Hello, welcome back to my channel and to another video. If this is your first time here, then hi, I am Eleanor Wilkinson. I am a recipe developer, cookbook author, food writer, content creator and solo travel enthusiast. And that is what I want to talk to you about today. So you might have already seen a couple of videos that I've shared about solo travel in Greece and in Edinburgh, but I've actually been traveling on my own for 10 years, which is pretty crazy, and I'm not quite sure how I'm old enough to say that, to be perfectly honest, because last time I checked I was still in my early 20s. Weird. So I have got a cup of tea and I just want to sit down and talk to you about how to plan the perfect solo travel trip. As I say, I've got 10 years of experience now, so I've picked up a few little tips and tricks along the way, some of which might be obvious and some of which I think could be a little bit controversial. And hopefully this encourages you to maybe plan your own solo trip. Also, excuse the lighting, it's that really, really beautiful autumn light that is sometimes very bright and sometimes very dark, and we're just gonna have to roll with it. Let Mother Nature do her thing, okay? Before I get into the tips and tricks, I thought I'd tell you a little bit about my solo travel experience. I know that the thought of solo travel can be really unappealing. I can totally understand why people would think that is absolutely not something I want to do. Why on earth would I go away by myself when I could go away with friends or with family or with a partner? And I totally get it. And just for clarity, I do still do all of those things. I don't only travel by myself. But I think the real joy of it comes from having the choice to be able to do something by and for yourself. And I really actually think that it can be quite a transformative experience. It's hard to describe, which I guess isn't ideal when I'm making a video trying to describe it. My very first solo travel experience was when I was 19. It was on a year out in between school and university, and it was actually entirely unplanned. And in this case, I would say the first time was probably the hardest time. So for context, I had planned to go traveling for 5 months with a friend, planned to go to Dubai, Malaysia, Australia, New Zealand, Fiji, the States, and then Iceland. And can you believe this? The flights, all of those flights, 10 flights all around the world, was £1,500. You'd barely get one flight nowadays for £1,500. And the friend that I was with, who is still a very, very good friend of mine, decided that actually felt like she was probably done after New Zealand and she didn't want to finish the rest of the trip. So I was kind of left with this decision as to whether to also go home or to carry on and do the rest of the trip by myself. It felt quite scary at the time, but I decided to stay. For this video, I'm just going to share some of the things that I've learned along the way from that trip and from all my other trips to hopefully help you plan your own solo trip. So after that, it was a couple of years before I did my next solo trip. Whilst I was a student at university, I think it was in my 4th year, I found flights to Copenhagen for, I think it was about £20. And I asked my friends, I was like, does anybody want to come to Copenhagen with me? And everybody said no. And I thought, I don't really want to go on my own. And that is exactly why I went, because I really hate the thought that I don't want to do things by myself or that I'm scared to do things by myself. And so I decided to go to Copenhagen, partially to challenge myself and to kind of challenge those thoughts that I couldn't do it, that I didn't want to do it, that I wouldn't enjoy it if I was by myself. Since then, I have been to Hong Kong, I've been to New York, I've been to a Greek island, and I've done some solo trips in and around the UK as well. So this is what I have learned. Oh, the sun is really twinkling through those leaves. Right, so starting at the beginning, what I think is really important before you even plan a solo trip is to take a moment to check in with yourself and think about what sort of experience you want to have on this trip. Don't think about what you should experience from a solo trip, what it's meant to be about, you know. I think because one of the most common times that people might travel by themselves is when you're maybe a bit younger, on a year out or something like that. There's kind of this expectation that the point of a solo trip is to meet lots and lots of people and to do things as a big group and to make friends. And whilst that is absolutely fine and valid and very, very fun, I definitely think it's worth asking yourself if that's the trip that you want to have. As I've got older, I now think that whilst it would be lovely to meet people, actually the purpose of my solo trips is to spend time with myself and by myself. And on every single trip I have met somebody along the way, but it's not the purpose of my trip. So whatever the purpose of your trip is, I think it's important to check in with yourself and figure out what you want this trip to be. From there, you can pick your destination. So I would say if you haven't done a solo trip before, then I would suggest 2 options to make it a really, really enjoyable experience. So my first option would be a city break. So for example, Edinburgh or New York or London, Paris, Barcelona, there are so many places that would be incredible to go. The reason I think a city break is a really brilliant idea for a solo trip is because there is so much to do and see and experience. And because there's the hustle and bustle of the city, you almost don't notice that you're by yourself as much. And if you're worried about people seeing you on your own and judging you or whatever, which you definitely shouldn't be worried about, by the way, but if you are worried about that, then I think being in a city almost makes you a bit more invisible. You can just kind of do your own thing and it's not as obvious that you're by yourself. So that's something to bear in mind if you're kind of maybe more self-conscious about the idea of being on your own or being noticed as being on your own. As I said, there are so many things to do in a city that you can really fill your days with so many things to keep you busy, to keep you interested. And in some ways, there's kind of less time to worry about not being with other people, if that's what you're worried about. My second suggestion, if you're not wanting a city break, is to plan a short, relaxing holiday. That could be to a nice hotel in the UK. Maybe it's got a little spa, a pool, somewhere you can read your book. Or it could be abroad. That would be nice too. A little sun lounger, a cocktail bar. Wherever it is, I think if you're planning a more relaxing holiday without as many kind of sightseeing events, I would say for your first trip, keep it a little bit shorter. There's something about having limited time that makes it feel more luxurious. Maybe it's like a supply and demand thing, you know? The supply is lower, and so you want it more. Whereas I think when you have a full week on your own, that can feel a little bit daunting and you can be a bit like, oh gosh, how am I gonna fill my time? What am I gonna do for 7 whole days without talking to anybody, without seeing anybody, etc., etc. So I would say that 2 to 3 days is the perfect amount of time for your first solo trip, whether that's a city break or a more relaxing trip, because that time feels so precious when you're there. And every single solo trip that I've been on, I found it really hard not to think about how grateful I am to be experiencing that when it's a really short amount of time. The other thing I'd say with picking the destination is that not every solo trip has to feel like a challenge. And thinking back to my first solo travel on my year out, it very much felt like a challenge then. And I remember my mum calling me actually and saying, this isn't a test. If you don't want to do it, you don't have to. You can come home. And that stuck with me the whole time. You are not there to test yourself. Whilst, you know, it might feel like it's out of your comfort zone and it might feel like a new and challenging thing to do, you don't have to make yourself feel uncomfortable for the whole time. You are there to enjoy the trip. And so when picking a destination, think about that. Think about what things you enjoy, where you feel safe, the type of environments that you feel safe in. Also, just a tip, if you are a female traveler, it is worth just thinking about what countries or cities or locations feel more safe to you as well, especially if you've not traveled by yourself very much in the past. But if you love hustle and bustle and architecture, nightlife, restaurants, then a city break sounds like you. Whereas if you find all of that a bit overwhelming and you want peace and calm and serenity and somewhere to read or relax, then book yourself into a nice little hotel. Go to the spa, babes. Think about how you're going to get maximum enjoyment from this trip and plan accordingly. The second thing to think about when you have chosen your destination is where you're going to stay. I am a very big fan of Airbnbs or like houses, flats for group trips. But I have to say, when I'm on my own, I personally would always choose a hotel over somewhere like an Airbnb. And for me, part of that comes from this kind of security and safety of knowing that there are other people around. Even if I'm in the safest place in the whole world, I just think it's nice to know that there are people above you and below you and next to you and at the front desk. So if you do have any issues, you can go and talk to them. You don't have to figure it all out by yourself, if that makes sense. Obviously, when you're traveling alone and you're not sharing a hotel room with, for example, a partner, you have to pay for the whole room by yourself, which can make things a lot more expensive. So bear that in mind. So the only suggestion I'd have there is that if a hotel feels like it's not in your budget, then obviously hostels are available and you can get private rooms in hostels if you're not interested in the sharing dorm option. Personally, my dormitory life, I think, is over. I think I'm done with hostel dorm life. So if I was going to stay in a hostel again, I would probably go for the private room option and it would still be so much cheaper than a hotel room. And honestly, some of them are just as nice. The third thing to think about is planning your itinerary for every day. My number one tip here is to not over plan. The joy of traveling by yourself is that you can be so flexible with your time and with your choices in the day. You never know who you're going to meet. You never know how you're going to feel on a specific day. And the best thing about being on your own is that you can chop and change your whole plan depending on how you feel and what you want to do. So I would say for any trip that you're going on, pick 1 or 2 things every day that you think, yeah, I'd really like to do that. I'd really like to go there, see this, eat that food. That's my goal for the day. Other than that, I'm just going to see where the day takes me. That way you have this kind of security of a little bit of structure without feeling like you have to do everything really regimented. I would have maybe a couple of other ideas in my head. So for example, if I knew I wanted to go to this museum, I would look at the area that that museum was in and see if there were any other nice things there. Is it a nice place to stroll around? Is there a nice coffee shop I can go to? Can I walk from here to my next place and see things along the way? So I would kind of have a general idea of the area or some other things that I might want to do, but I wouldn't set a regimented like hour by hour plan, because then you kind of lose the flexibility that's the best part of solo travel. Because you don't know, you might go into a coffee shop and get chatting to the barista who says that this is the best place to go for lunch. Or you might meet somebody who says, oh, I'm just gonna go to this art gallery, do you wanna come? Be safe, obviously, talk to only the nice strangers. But there've been lots of times where I've thought, oh, I'm gonna do this, and then on the day, something else has happened and I've ended up doing something completely different. And it's something that you can do by yourself that you can't necessarily do with other people, because when you're with other people, you have to take into consideration everything that they want to do as well. Whereas when you're on your own, you can be totally selfish, and I highly encourage that. The other reason that I love not planning too much is because the more I've traveled and the older I've got, the more I've realized that so much of the joy of travel is just by kind of sitting and stopping and being and people watching and appreciating sort of where you are. Because I love doing that, I would always suggest carrying around a book, because you might stumble across a really cute cafe or coffee shop. Stopping to sit, have a hot drink, read your book and just observe. It's just one of life's greatest joys and greatest pleasures. And I feel like it's in those moments that you really think about the fact that you have come on your own to do this trip and experience a new culture or a new city or a new food. And how lucky are we to be able to do that? So I would say plan time to stop. My next tip is maybe slightly biased because I am a professional cook, but it's all about food. Food is just the best way to experience a culture, if you ask me. And my tip for traveling on your own is to not be scared of going out for dinner by yourself. I think breakfast and lunch can feel quite normal. Lots of people get breakfast or lunch by themselves in their day-to-day lives, but going out for dinner by yourself feels quite scary. It's something I'm going to talk about more, and I'm actually going to be starting a series in the new year all about going for dinner by yourself. But when you're on a solo trip, it's kind of the same thing I was saying about just stopping for a moment in a coffee shop. Having dinner by yourself is a moment to relax, enjoy your food. You can pick any restaurant, any cuisine, any vibe that you want. You could go to somewhere busy and bustling with a dance floor and cocktails and whatever. You could go to a gorgeous family-run, local, quiet restaurant. The choice is yours. And again, I would say it's not meant to be a challenge. If you find going out for dinner by yourself hard, think about what would make it more enjoyable. You don't have to sit there and not do anything. Just look around and enjoy your food and not talk and not do anything. If taking a book is going to make that dinner more enjoyable for you, take a book and enjoy reading while you eat your pasta and sip your wine. One of my favourite things to do is to take a notebook and write about what I'm eating and how I'm feeling and what I'm seeing and observing. A, because it's a lovely thing for me to look back on in the future, hopefully. Also because it kind of makes me think maybe they think I'm a food critic, maybe they think I'm a restaurant critic, and I can just pretend to be somebody else for the evening. Do you know what I mean? I can be there, you know, writing my little book, like they'll bring out the food and I'll be like, oh, not in a judgy way, just in a fun way, you know? Maybe I'm manifesting being a restaurant critic at some point in my future. I really love it, and I think having kind of something to do with my hands is really nice, because I wouldn't love to be there just like scrolling on my phone. If I can do something else, I think that's probably a better use of my time. So reading or writing, something like that. You could take a little sketchbook, a little painting pad. How fun would that be? Doesn't that just sound gorgeous? Also, do not worry about people judging you. If anything, people are looking at you and thinking, wow, they're so cool, going out for dinner by themselves. I love that. That's so confident. That's so brave. Good for them. If you struggle with thinking about what other people might be thinking about you, then pretending that you're somebody else to yourself is quite a nice way, like pretending you're a restaurant critic. Make up a story, romanticize, fantasize. Do you know what I mean? There are no rules. I appreciate I'm telling you things to do. These aren't rules, these are just suggestions. There are no rules when it comes to solo travel. So make the experience whatever you want to make it. Do something that you wouldn't do with other people. Be somebody that you might not be with other people. No one will know, no one will find out. It's just fun. is fun. And then my very, very last tip is just to document your trip in whatever way feels nice for you. So whether that's taking photos or taking videos, writing, drawing, even down to picking a specific outfit that you know is always going to remind you of that trip. I think I'm very aware that I don't know that I'm always going to be in a position to be able to solo travel, because currently I don't have any children or any dependents. So I'm very lucky that if I want to plan a trip by myself, I can. And I think knowing that that might not be an option for the whole of my life makes me want to document it more, remember it more. For me, taking photos or videos or writing is a moment to stop and be like, wow, I really appreciate whatever it is I'm documenting at this time. And I know that some people say, put your phone away, you know, everyone looks through screens, and I can understand that, but it's also, I think, a way to capture how you feel and what you find interesting at that time. You know, what's worth taking a picture of to you at this moment in your life, because that might change in the future. You might look back and be like, why on earth did I take that photo? We'll be like, oh yeah, I remember that I loved this at that time and that's why I took that photo. So again, don't let other people's opinions try and sway your trip too much, and document where you can, because I can guarantee that it's something you're going to want to look back on when you're older. So those are my top solo travel tips. I'm planning lots more solo trips, which I'm going to be vlogging to share with you guys, so make sure you stick around for those. And if there's anything else that you want to know about solo travel, when to go, where to go, then let me know in the comments and I will do my best to help wherever possible. Hopefully this has inspired you to maybe think about taking your own solo trip if you're able to. It really is the most transformative experience, and I think learning to not only be comfortable in your own company but to enjoy it is something really special, and something that I'm very grateful that I've had the time and the opportunity to do. You only get one life and there's only one me, and if I can't spend time with this me, then that's gonna be tough. So yes, it can feel like a challenge, yes it can feel a bit uncomfortable at times, but it can also feel exciting and joyful and meaningful and brilliant. And I would just encourage anybody who has the opportunity to go on a trip alone to do it. And if you do decide to go on a solo trip, then please tell me about it. I would love to hear where you go and what you did. Okay, I think that is all for this week's video. I will see you next Sunday for another recipe video. Bye.